Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to What Mike, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 6, Episode 6 of AMC's Better Call Saul, entitled Axe and Grind. Title's pretty obvious. We're putting all the pieces into place for this big plan against Howard. Axe and Grind is clearly a callback, but a reference to the term axe to grind, which is just a term that kind of means like you got beef with somebody, which is clearly what's happening here. And then it also is kind of like a double entendre because we have the good scene with Lalo as well. So and Lalo has an axe to grind as well. So it's a pretty nice double entendre kind of title. But I'm wondering what people think about this episode. I feel like 3 weeks in a row now we've kind of had these setup episodes that are moving these pieces into place for whatever this big plan is and how it's going to work out and what the fallout from it is going to be. And then also, how is this show going to be structured? You know, this is the mid-season finale. We haven't seen any of the Eugene storyline. I thought there was a possibility the whole second half of the season might be a Eugene storyline, but I don't think they're going to wrap up the Saul portion next week. So, not really sure what's happening there. But, we had the big episode with Nacho's death. And since then, everything's kind of been set up. But they just do this so well. And I love how this show will leave you to kind of piece things together. And they'll give you just the bare minimum. Here's what you need to know in order to put together what's going on here. And usually they give you enough to put everything together. But we're still kind of in a place where we've got some pieces, but we don't really have them all. And we know where this is going and that something's going to happen with Howard. It's probably going to go wrong. But we still don't know what it is. And this show does love to do that where it's like, it's the same way they structure an episode, right? They'll have the opening, which they didn't do this week, they did it, but they didn't do what I'm about to describe. They'll have this opening, and then you're just sitting here like, what does this what does this mean? What does this have to do with anything? And then by the time the episode is over, the opening makes sense. And that's what we're doing with this Howard situation. We're seeing these pieces come together and this plan starting to take shape, but we don't know what this is. And I think they're doing a great job of kind of like building up this intrigue over the course of these past 3 episodes for us to really be tuned in for whatever this plan is going to be. Especially because right now on paper, I don't have enough info on it to even know if it's going to be like a good plan or not. It's just my faith and trust in the show that lets me know that this is going to be something worth checking out. So let's kind of start with a couple of the big moments, but important moments that take place in this episode and how they tie into the big storyline. So we have this opening scene with Kim as a kid. She's being reprimanded in a department store by her mom. She stole a necklace and earrings. And the mom's just like putting on this whole performance, right? Which we don't know is a performance at the time. But she's putting on this whole performance, about being disappointed, trying to pay for the necklace. The guy's like, no, it's fine. She's offering to pay for it, coming out of Kim's allowance, this whole thing, right? They leave the store, and the mom immediately starts smiling, and we quickly realize that this was all a ruse. The mom actually ended up stealing the necklace to give back to Kim, almost as a reward for doing this whole shady plan. And then we see now where Kim gets this ability to toe the line between right and wrong. On one hand, she's got all her pro bono work. We see her in court helping this guy out who is racially profiled. But then on the other hand, she has the ability to be really cunning and devious. And we see her get that from her mother, this kind of like extravagant plan with the misdirection. And it's the same kind of shit she does with Jimmy, or that Jimmy does, and that probably helped pull them together, that helped them connect, is that he was speaking to a part of her that she kind of buries, that she's had since she was a kid, that does these sort of elaborate plans and misdirections. And getting involved with Jimmy is probably awakening that inside her, and that might be part of the motivation or spark for them to even be together, because they don't really seem like they would fit if you look at Kim's, I don't want to say good side, but the side of Kim that wants to do good should be directly in conflict with everything that Jimmy does, but it's not. And I think it's because he awakens that part of her that really likes to do this kind of stuff. So we get a little bit clearer of a picture of partially her motivation, but also partially why she's the kind of person who's willing to do something like this at the same time as trying to do something to help little people. The idea like, okay, I'm going to tear down just a department store, not tear down a department store, but, I'm going to pull this prank on this department store. They're just a big corporation. Who cares? And then on the same hand, at the same time, we see her being the kind of person who will help people who are not as well off as a big giant department store. She'll help those people, but it's fine with tearing down the big corporations, the big department store, the HHM, all that kind of stuff. So I really like what we learned about Kim in this episode. Well, speaking of what we learned about Kim, she also gets we don't know if it's an offer or if it's like a opportunity to impress these people from this Jackson Mercer Foundation. I guess they do a lot of big nonprofit work or work to help others. And they're big and well known on the East Coast. And Kim's about to have a meeting with them that could essentially change your life. Something where, this could be the opportunity to open up something like that there in Albuquerque. Because that's what she says. You're like, I wish we had something like that here. So maybe she's going to meeting with them to get potential funding to open up a Jackson Mercer Foundation location there in Albuquerque. Then maybe Kim could run it. So huge opportunity. But after what we saw with Little Kim, no pun intended. After what we saw with Little Kim, we know that she's willing to really prioritize the prank at the expense of her reputation. And I think that's what we're seeing here by the end of this episode. Jimmy's like, this prank ain't gonna work. We gotta call it off. And she's willing to sacrifice her reputation to pull it off. And we see her bust that U-turn to head back and ruin her life. It's gonna be so sad what happens to Kim, and I'm not ready for it. As far as Lalo goes, he finds one of the guys that worked on the laundromat meth lab. And they have a very exciting scene where we see the guy chopping wood. Lalo shows up. He immediately recognizes this is probably a problem. And they have like a brief moment where the guy runs off. I don't think Lalo shot. I think he just pulled the gun. And the guy runs off, and Lalo stalks him throughout this, seemed like a barn or a tool shed or something like that. And the guy hits Lalo in the stomach with the blunt side of the axe, the non-sharp side. And Lalo thinks that he broke a rib, and we hear Lalo breathing really heavy, sounding really hurt. He has a razor behind the card, and he uses the card to cut the guy's face, and then he uses the axe to chop his foot off, and then says to tie it off, and they're going to have a talk. So it's only a matter of time before Lalo knows everything he needs to know about Gus's laundromat, and we will probably see that confrontation next week as well. Lalo finally arriving. But we know that Gus has cameras and people watching everywhere for his arrival. So how is Lalo going to get past all that? That I'm really excited to see that. He's played the long game like no one has ever done it. Lalo has, and he's eventually got to end up there. So how does this play out when everyone on the Gus Mike side of the storyline has been incredibly paranoid, waiting for Lalo? I think probably a lot of time has passed to the point where they might kind of feel like, okay, maybe he's just not coming, and shit, maybe that's how he gets to him. Maybe they do just go, maybe he's just not coming, and they stop looking, and that's when he arrives. I don't know, but I'm excited to see what happens with Lalo. And then we get a few more little pieces of this plan. Jimmy's meeting with the veterinarian that we know. He's getting some sort of work done or taking something that's gonna make his skin darker, and they say it's gonna have he's gonna feel like he's on like 2 Red Bulls on an empty stomach for a couple of hours. He's setting up like these fake pictures to be taken with this guy who's meant to dress up as this Casimira judge. But then we find out that the judge won't match the lookalike because the judge broke his arm. And that's what makes it so that Jimmy says we got to call this off because we can't. It's very obvious in the pictures he has no cast. In real life, he does have a cast. I don't know how they plan on fixing that, but I don't know. I can't even fully understand what the plan is at this point. Jimmy takes $20,000 out of the bank, hands it to this guy. I think that Howard is meant to think that Jimmy is bribing this sandpiper judge, but I don't know why Jimmy looking bad is part of Jimmy's plan. I don't know what the plan is, but whatever it is, it has to stop, and Kim's not going to do it. And then One other thing I want to talk about before I wrap up, I didn't want to keep this one too long because not when I say not a ton happens here, I'm not being critical. I'm just saying like they put a whole lot of effort into the into building this building the visual, building the art, right? You will have a long scene of things happening in a shot. Or that reminds me, there's one more thing I want to talk about. Things happening in a shot and we don't know what that is, and they're just building the scenery, right? Telling the story visually. But as far as like what you actually take away from that scene, other than the artistry of it, it might just be something as simple like Lalo runs into laundromat guy and cuts his ankle off, cuts his foot off. But a couple of things that I liked about this show that I like about this show that I saw in this episode were examples of that. One of them, nice scene. We find out that Mike took the security off of his own house, and Gus sends Tyrus to question him about it, and says like the better place would be Alameda, and we're like, what is Alameda? Turns out that's where Mike's daughter-in-law and his granddaughter stay at, and he's across the street from them. And he nightly he goes there and he gets on the phone with the granddaughter, was Kaylee, I think his name is, and they do some stargazing virtually. They think he's in Chattanooga, Tennessee, but you know he obviously can't say that where he actually is. But they share a nice scene, and it's cool. And then another scene I want to talk about real quick, and this is going to be the last one before I wrap up. There's a interesting scene with Howard at the beginning of this episode. After the opening credits, you know, we saw earlier in this season Howard talking to a therapist, and I love how everything matters on this show, right? You would think that Howard talking to a therapist is just here's what Howard's doing while Jimmy does his plan with the car, which is what happened. Yeah, that was the episode where he took the car, had Huel copy the keys, I think, and then that's when he put it back, and then the sign was somebody was parked in that spot, even though he put the cone there and he moved the sign. That episode. What Howard was discussing with the therapist, or whatever situation you put Howard into to allow Jimmy to do that plan, can be inconsequential. You can just have Howard be anywhere. That doesn't matter. Oh, Howard went to the gym and he worked out. And then Jimmy pulls that plan out. But instead, they use that opportunity to tell us that Howard is having problems in his marriage. And again, two things at the same time. That one, they didn't even have to use that opportunity to give us some more insight into Howard. But I'm wondering how this is going to play out, because this week we actually see Howard's wife, and she looks familiar to me. I know I've seen her in something else, but I can't put my finger on it. But we see Howard's wife, and it is awkward. Howard has his automatic shoe buffer. He has a fancy coffee machine. He's like his own personal Starbucks. He makes her a coffee like you would get where they have the like a picture design and cream on the top. Makes her this really extravagant coffee. The design on it is like the peace sign, which I mean could not be more of it's a literal peace offering. Like, can we stop beefing? Here's a peace offering, literally a peace offering. And she walks right past it and dumps it in a travel mug and completely ignores it. Like, man, that sucked. That really sucked. Howard tries to suggest that they go to some sort of event together. She's like, no, I'll go by myself, or something to that effect. She leaves. Really bad scene for Howard. This show doesn't introduce aspects that don't go anywhere. So I'm wondering how I should say, Howard's struggling marriage is going to impact this plan next week. And I'm really curious to see what this plan is going to be. So I'm going to wrap up. Next week we get to see this plan play out. Things are probably going to go really bad for Jimmy and Kim, which is going to make me really nervous watching this episode. Lalo's either going to find out information and be making his way to Albuquerque, or he will arrive. Whatever this is with Howard and his wife should play out as well. And hopefully it will intersect with whatever this plan is. And I think we can expect fireworks next week. So until then, peace.